Welcome to another episode of Meal Prep Monday. I'm your host, Allison Schaaf. Today, in honor of Earth Day, I'm doing an episode on food waste and ideas on creative ways to use food that might otherwise go to waste. So let's just dive right in. I've written down 5 different ideas with a bonus idea at the end. The first one is to save. So actually, before I go into the 5 different ways, there are kind of a few different kinds of food waste. So one is food that you don't end up using, that you buy that you don't end up using to eat or make something. But then the second category is food that's been on a plate that someone didn't eat at mealtime, which probably happens in every household. If you have toddlers or young children, I'm guessing it happens a lot more. That's one thing that I don't feel like anyone maybe told me about. You don't think to tell someone that when you have toddlers and babies, there's going to be a lot more food waste, and, trying to figure out let's not put too much on their plate. So that's one strategy. That's not one of the 5, but I have learned with them, it's better and it's less overwhelming too, to put less on their plate, and then they can always ask for more. But yeah, there is some food waste there, and I'll get into some ideas for that as well. But these first few are for that first category of foods of, okay, I didn't use all of this onion. What should I do? So number 1 with food waste is make a soup. So soups are amazing for using up any kind of leftover vegetable, whether it's already been cooked or not. If you have a bunch of cooked vegetables, my recommendation is to put them all in a blender, add some broth and puree them. And some of the best pureed soups I've had are made this way, just by, throwing in a bunch of leftover vegetables and even fruits. So there's like a sweet potato and pear soup that I've made. Carrot and apple is really good. So sometimes you can add some fruits in for soups as well. But this is just a really good way. I know some people have a strategy where they'll just keep a soup bowl in their fridge, and the end of the week they throw it all together and to make a soup. You can also use this, use leftover proteins in this as well. So, things like chop up leftover steak or chicken, and turn those, add those with the vegetables, some leftover rice or pasta. And a lot of these things can make really delicious soups. Okay, number 2 is to freeze leftovers for a smoothie. And this is a good strategy for any fruit, and then for a lot of vegetables as well. So if I have a zucchini that's going bad, I will chop it up and put it in the freezer. That goes really good in a smoothie. Avocados, if they all turn ripe at the same time and you're not able to eat them all, those can be frozen and tossed into a smoothie. Any fruits, bananas, apples, any berries. If I can see that the key is to kind of catch them right before they turn bad. But if you can see that that's going to happen and you're not going to have time to get to everything before they do, then throw them in the freezer for a smoothie. The third one, and this is still in the category of I didn't use it, but for broth, you can use the scraps, the literal scraps of the onion peel, the garlic peel, carrots, celery, onion is kind of the standard, but there's other vegetable leftovers that can go in there. Sometimes I will save things. Leeks are really good as well, but even things like green onion or fennel is what I'm thinking of. Some of those scraps as well can make a really nice broth. And for that, I will usually put those in the freezer. I don't always know when I'm going to make my next batch of broth. So sometimes I'll just, have an ongoing bucket of carrot, onion, and celery and garlic peels that I keep in the freezer to make my broth with. Fourth place to give food waste, and this depends on if you have who's living in your house. But for us, there's the hierarchy of first, I ask myself, will the goats eat it? The goats are a little particular. They love bananas. They actually love banana peels, more of the black ones. They can't only certain banana peels, but they do like to eat banana peels and certain fruits. So apple slices, my boys love snacking on apples. So that's a go-to if we're going to be going somewhere in the car. I'll chop up a bunch of apples. If they don't get to them, I bring them home. The goats love it. So they kind of get first dibs on things, and then almost everything else will go to the chickens. The chickens love, I don't know, almost everything I can feed to the chickens. And then number 5, and this is if it can't go in any of these other things, we do have a big compost pile. And composting is something that I've heard now, like in cities, I think that certain places will pick up compost. So you can have trash, recycling, and compost. So that's one thing to look into if you're in more of a city environment. And then if you're not, I would look into creating a compost pile. So ours is nothing fancy. I know that we're not doing ours properly, quote unquote. We're not, I'd love to get to that someday. And if you can, even better, but just know that just having a big pile of food scraps works. Like that's better than nothing. We've kind of fenced off this little area that we use, and we just throw everything in there and we don't do it very strategically in terms of getting good soil out of it, but it is a good place to just put all of our, food scraps, again, like things that a lot of things off, going back to the leftovers on the toddler plates. A lot of those things we can feed to the chickens. And that makes me feel really good for things like salmon, because if the chickens are eating salmon, that actually helps the nutritional profile of their eggs. And this means we're eating, higher omega-3 content eggs. So definitely makes me feel better seeing the chickens eat those when the boys have leftovers. But the compost is another great way to help not throw all that waste directly into the trash. So those are the 5 items. And then number 6, the bonus. And this is how to avoid having the food waste in the first place. And shameless plug for Prep Dish meal plans, but really any meal plan. So just being more intentional with what you buy on a week-to-week basis is the best way to reduce food waste. And this is something at Prep Dish that we put way more time into than, I wouldn't say the necessary. I think we put the necessary amount of time into being very strategic and intentional with our grocery lists. When we put something on the grocery list, we make sure that we are using that, and you're not going to be left over with a bunch of random vegetables withering away in the back of your fridge. So, if we have you buy a whole head of celery, we're not going to have you use, just two pieces of celery and leave the rest with nothing to do with it. And, just that's true of any vegetable that's on our plan, is we make sure that you use all of it. So if we have you use half an onion in a soup, we make sure that it's also chopped up and used in one of the other dishes for that week. With, the pantry items, there's a little more wiggle room to buy, a whole pack of nuts and use half of it, because you can use them in upcoming plans. Although we do try and make sure that, if it is a pantry item, a spice or, tamari, like a sauce or something like that we don't just use it once and never use it again. We don't want you to buy a jar of, dried thyme and then never use it again the rest of the year. So we do try and think through and make sure anything that we're having you purchase for use in the meal plans gets used up, most of it that week. And then the pantry items, we revisit from time to time. If you are not a Prep Dish subscriber, you can go to prepdish.com/MPM, short for Meal Prep Monday, and try us out for 2 weeks for free. With that 2-week free trial, you have access to a lot of different meal plans. So I'd encourage you to kind of open those up. And even if you just want to look at them and get an idea of like, oh, this is how I could design my grocery list so that I'm not having as much waste week to week, I think that's a good way to start. Even like, I just had a thought of like another way that might be a good tip for you if you're doing your own meal planning is, if we going back to that celery or, even carrot idea of like, oh, you only need 2 pieces of celery, then chop up the rest of it right then and there and put it in a container and have that be your snack one day. Like that, maybe with some peanut, I don't know. I still love the celeries dipped with peanut butter and raisins, like the ants on a log. But just making sure that, whatever you're buying for the week, you have a plan for it and it's not just going to sit there and end up in your compost. And I really do think that should probably be number 1 in terms of food waste is, first being more intentional with what is going on the grocery list. Another way that I do this is when I look at the kids' snacks for the week, they have fruit for their snack in the mornings, and I'm always making sure that we're using the fruits in order that they're going to still be good, right? Like if there's some berries and they look like they may only be good for a few days, we'll start with the berries and have the apples towards the end of the week, or the oranges that are going to last a little longer towards the end of the week. So even just kind of the order in which you eat foods being more strategic, I guess you could say. And that's something we do also on the meal plans is, meal one is usually, if there's seafood that week, that's usually at the beginning of the week, because we know that if we wait till day 4 or 5, it may not be as fresh anymore. So that's something we're also thinking through in terms of creating the meal plans, is like, how do we reduce waste in multiple different ways? So hopefully walking through this list of ideas has sparked some different thoughts in your mind of ways that you might reduce some food waste in your life. If you are a regular listener of this podcast, I would love it if you could take a quick screenshot and share it with a friend, or maybe, share it on social media. Just anyone that you think might benefit from listening to this podcast. I would always love it and appreciate you sharing it. That's how other people find us and how our podcast grows. That is all I have for this week. I will be back again next Monday with another episode.